Bolivar Live, Birding on Bolivar with Winnie and Wyatt is brought to you by Beachy Beatnik Boutique, located at 970 Surfside and Highway 87 in Crystal Beach, Texas. Hey everybody, I'm David with Bolivar Live, and like last week, we're here at Lewis Boy Scout Woods, but we're kicking off the Birding on Bolivar with Winnie and Wyatt today. This is going to be a 9-week series. Today we're going to concentrate on history of the Highland area and the Audubon Society here. I think, Wyatt, you've been here about 4 or 5 years.
4 years.
4 years. Winnie's been here for 30. So she's seen it grown. In fact, we're going to be showing some video and some clips of the old Highland and the new Highland and stuff. But Winnie, you and I were looking at the pictures, and Highland, as it used to be, with the picture we were looking at was 1930. Mm-hmm. It was desolate. We didn't have the trees here. Let's talk about first the history of Highland and how it became the natural beauty that it is.
Okay, so Highland is unique on the Gulf Coast. High Island is 28 feet high, and it's the highest point between the Mississippi River and the Yucatan Peninsula. And High Island is high because it's the surfaced expression of a salt dome. And what that means is there's a big layer of salt way down deep in the sediments, and salt is light, and it makes bubbles, and it comes up and it cracks the sediments around it, and a lot of them don't have a surface expression, but High Island is a surface expression of one of those bubbles. So 26 feet up is a lot higher than the marshes around it. And so it's an island of upland habitat in the middle of marshes. Now, the early settlers came here and they had farms, and then in the mid-1800s they put the railroad through and they could send vegetables and fruit to Beaumont. And then the tourists came down to the hotel that they made in High Island. There was a 40-room, quite nice hotel that took people down to the beach. And hurricanes and fires changed all that. And the farmers early on started planting trees. There was John Brown and George Smith who liked planting trees, and they planted mostly oak trees. And we'll see some of those big live oaks and Smith oaks in another time, maybe later today. But the woods here are woods because of a guy named Lewis Smith, and our sanctuary is called the Lewis Smith Sanctuary. And Lewis lived across the street. His house is gone, but he had 4 acres. And in the 1950s, ornithologists started to realize that migrating birds crossed the Gulf of Mexico. They didn't think that was possible before that, but science proved that they were crossing the Gulf of Mexico. And then bird watchers thought, well, if they're crossing the Gulf of Mexico, which for a bird is 18 hours of flying, they're going to be tired. So we ought to bird along the coast in places that have habitat. So in the 50s, bird watchers from Beaumont started coming to High Island, and Lewis Smith welcomed the bird watchers and on this land. And in the late 80s, Houston Audubon wound up buying this property from Mr. Smith across the street. Lewis Smith was a different Smith than the other Smiths that we'll see. But so we bought the land and we put in bathrooms, and ultimately we had to put in a grandstand because so many people brought chairs that they were in front of each other. Oh, and the reason that they were there was because we had a drip. Now, when birds cross the Gulf of Mexico, they're tired, number one. They need to sit down, they need food, and they need water. And they need water to drink because it's 18 hours and they're thirsty, but they also need to take a bath because there's been salt in the air. So a place for the birds to bathe and drink was very important. And you could sit on the grandstands over there and see a great variety of birds with not much work.
Yeah.
So Houston Audubon bought this 4 acres in the 80s, and Audubon chapters don't usually own land. And so this was our first High Island sanctuary. Then we bought 11 acres over at Smith Oaks. And then we were given 140 acres by Amoco, who owned land down here that was not profitable. And they donated money, and their donation we used as a match to get grants to do habitat restoration and put boardwalks in. And we have other pieces of property now in the High Island area, and we own over 800 acres here. Not all of it is very accessible, but some of it is very accessible, and we'll tell you more about that.
I've seen a difference just from walking around, and Wyatt, part of your job is managing everything up here. We were talking earlier about invasive species, and because we were talking about getting land donated, it's not just getting the land. You have to be able to take care of it through invasive species and manage the property too. What's part of you as far as managing, what goes into it? Because a lot of people think, oh, they just let it grow up and they go through and cut a path in the spring and it's done. But there's a lot of work that goes on year round here, isn't there?
There is. So you'd think that it's a little counterintuitive to think that we would go in and then cut some of these wonderful trees that we were just talking about, provide habitat. But not all plants are equal in terms of the amount of insects and things that they can support. So invasive species, particularly here on the coast, we deal primarily with Chinese tallow and Chinese privet. Both of those are from the Old World and were introduced for various reasons. Ornamental, and during the colonial period, they were used for cooking fuel along the wagon trains. But those plants don't support, because they're not from this area, they don't support the insects that native plants do. Okay. And so basically what we do is we manage these sanctuaries. As Winnie had mentioned, these birds are flying these long distances. We're kind of a rest area for birds. We like to call ourselves a Buc-ee's for birds. So if the birds get here and it's all invasive species, there aren't going to be very many prey items for them to eat. Right. And they're hungry. And so by removing invasive species and encouraging native species, we're essentially trying to increase the amount of habitat and the quality of habitat for these birds. And so we spend a lot of our winter and our fall and our winter pursuing those management programs. And then also, if you've been down to the coast during the summer, things grow pretty fast. And so throughout the summer, a lot of our trails will grow in. And so we got to constantly kind of keep those open.
Manicured.
Exactly. So that way in the spring, our visitors can actually get through to those areas.
Great. This is going to be a 9-week series, and I wanted to start off today to talk a little bit about the history. And I have a feeling we're going to be doing some more history on the High Island area, because between the pier and Audubon, I've learned about some awesome history that needs to be told here on High Island. Some of the families, like the big hotel that Winnie was talking about. But for the next 9 weeks now, we're going to be talking about birding on Bolivar, and we're going to, like I said, we're going to cover from High Island to the Bolivar Ferry, more or less. This show here was just a touch on the history and getting a feel for everything. Our next show is actually going to be next Monday, is going to be at the Rookery, and then the following Monday we're going to talk about Boy Scout Woods. So about 3 weeks. Smith Oaks, I'm sorry about that, Smith Oaks. And so for about 3 weeks, we're going to concentrate in the Highland area, and then we're going to be moving down onto Bolivar Peninsula, and then the last week, April 28th, we're going to be back at the Rookery, showing you the difference from 8 or 9 weeks can make in what's going on. So y'all, thanks for joining me today. Until next time, I'm David with Bolivar Live. Y'all have a great day, great week. Come see us. God bless, and bye-bye. Looking for the perfect blend of seaside charm and unique style? Nestled right here in the heart of Crystal Beach, Texas, is Beachy Beatnik Boutique, located at 970 Surfside and Highway 87. Beachy Beatnik Boutique is your coastal fashion haven and Jewelry Lovers Paradise. Special thank you to Beachy Beatnik Boutique for sponsoring our Spring 2025 Bolivar Live Birding on Bolivar. Video equipment is sponsored by Crystal Beach Decor and More, located at 1959 Highway 87 in Crystal Beach, Texas, and Beachy Beatnik Boutique and Jewelry, located at 970 Surfside and Highway 87 in Crystal Beach, Texas. Thank you to these two businesses for being our 2025 video equipment sponsor for Bolivar Live.